Welcome to the Remnant Trust at IPFW. The Remnant Trust is a private foundation located in Jeffersonville, Indiana. They own over 900 first and early edition significant historical works. We're lucky enough to have 53 of those works here on campus, along with 2 of our own from the IPFW Helmke Library. I'm Dr. Pat Ashton. I teach sociology and peace and conflict studies here at IPFW. I've studied these works, taught about them for many years, but I've also recently researched the particular stories behind these books. I'd like to share those with you. Let's take a look together at the Remnant Trust at IPFW. This is a section of the exhibit entitled Women and Power. You'll immediately notice that it's the smallest section of the exhibit. And as a matter of fact, there are only 4 books, and only one of them was written by a woman. Altogether, we have 3 books in the exhibit written by women, one of them here on this table, 2 in other sections. This reflects the historical reality that women were not given access to education, were not allowed to write books, and as we've seen in the case of Mary Shelley, were not allowed to put their name on books when they did write them. So we will look at the books that were written by and about women, and I think you'll find them pretty interesting. The first book we have is by Plutarch. Plutarch was a Greek philosopher of the 1st century of the current era. He wrote something called The Virtues of Women, and in this book he laid out heroic deeds done by women in times of trouble, especially fighting against, as he called them, tyrants. So it was one of the first attempts to portray the heroism of women. This particular edition was published in Latin in 1485, about 1400 years after Plutarch actually wrote it. Our next book is the one book in this section that's actually written by a woman, A Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft. Mary Wollstonecraft was a British feminist. She was married to William Godwin, who was the father of philosophical anarchism. Together they had a daughter, Mary, who wrote, eventually, Frankenstein, that's over in the Dark Side of Humanity section, right across the way. Mary Wollstonecraft originally responded to Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France with outrage. She was very upset in his defense of monarchy. So she wrote a book that same year, published 1790, called Vindication of the Rights of Man, in which she argued strongly for democracy. 2 years later, she came out with this, The Vindication of the Rights of Women. I'm sure she thought, rights of man? What about the rights of women? So in this book, she argues vehemently for the education of women, saying that women need to be part of democratic society, need to be equal contributors, but can only do so if they're educated with men. She was very against separate but equal education, said that women should be educated in the same fashion, the same way as men, and that they were fully capable of doing so. A powerful first wave feminist book by Mary. The next book is written about a woman, I'd like to say famous woman, but perhaps not very well known by many Americans. A woman named Deborah Sampson. She's a woman who fought in the American Revolution, actually, disguised as a man. And we know this to be a true story. She disguised herself as a man, fought for 3 years in the American Revolution. She was actually wounded. She treated her own wounds so that she would not be discovered, which meant that her leg, which had been shot, never fully healed properly. Unfortunately, unluckily, a year later, she came down with a heavy fever and was hospitalized. The doctor, in treating her, discovered that she was a woman. Went to General Henry Knox, who mustered her out of the Army with an honorable discharge. So Deborah Sampson served for over 3 years fighting the American Revolution, honorably discharged. She was, however, excommunicated by her church for daring to pose as a man. Well, a gentleman named Herman Mann took Deborah's diaries and turned them into a book called The Female Review, Memoirs of an American Young Lady. If this was made into a TV series today, it would be subtitled Based on a True Story. Because Mann elaborated a little bit on the truth. But we know that the basic details of this are absolutely true. I mean, I think Mann did this because Deborah Sampson was unable to get access to publish her own autobiography at the time, being a woman, and a not very well-educated woman. But Mann did publish this diary, and we know that later on, Deborah Sampson was given a pension by the state of Massachusetts in one lump sum payment. And then Paul Revere, he of the famous or infamous Ride, wrote a letter to Congress in 1804 and asking Congress to give her a pension. And Deborah Sampson was granted a monthly pension by Congress, which she got until the day she died. So a rather inspirational story of Deborah Sampson. And we have John Stuart Mill, The Subjection of Women. John Stuart Mill, the great British philosopher, his book on liberty, one of the strongest defenses on liberty, is in Advancing the Rights of Humanity, or On the Other Side of the Wall. This book was pioneering for its time, and Mill himself gives credit to his wife, Harriet Taylor, a British feminist, who he said not only influenced his views on women, but influenced his views on liberty, and was a powerful influence in the writing of his book on liberty. So Harriet Taylor influenced her husband to become a feminist man and to argue for the complete and total equality of women on the basis of principles of liberty and freedom. And that is this manifesto, The Subjection of Women. The Remnant Trust at IPFW will not go on forever, but the ideas contained in these works most certainly will. I'm Pat Ashton. Thanks for joining me on this tour of the Remnant Trust at IPFW.